You only need to live by this, and your life will be happy. Before we begin, like the channel, subscribe, and I'll tell you the key to making your life better. Living with faith doesn't just mean believing in God or a higher power, but also having confidence that, even though we don't fully understand the course of events in our lives, everything has a purpose. Faith allows us to move forward when everything seems lost and gives us the courage needed to face the unknown. One of the main reasons it's essential to live with faith is that it provides us with a compass during uncertain times. In an age where the future is unclear and life often presents us with unforeseen challenges, faith acts as a beacon that guides us forward. In the Bible, Hebrews 11 verse 1 says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see." This means that faith enables us to keep going even when we don't see immediate or clear results. Faith helps us maintain a positive attitude in the face of adversity because it reminds us that, although we may not understand why we're going through certain difficulties, there's a greater purpose behind it all. This concept is not only biblical but also supported by psychological studies that show people with strong spirituality tend to be more resilient when facing life's challenges. Faith plays a fundamental role in Christian life because it's the foundation of the relationship between humans and God. Jesus repeatedly emphasized the importance of faith through his teachings and actions. Faith in Christianity isn't just about believing in God's existence but about deeply trusting and adhering to him in all circumstances, especially when facing difficulties and uncertain situations. The essence of faith is surrender, which means placing all our life decisions in God's hands. Faith isn't just wishing for something to happen but believing that God will do what's best for us, even when we don't fully understand the path he is guiding us on. Jesus' statement in Mark 11 verse 24 emphasizes, "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." This implies that faith isn't merely a state of mind but the certainty that God is acting, even when we don't yet see the results. It's accepting that there are things beyond human sight and understanding. Faith is what God requires of those who follow him. We don't believe only when we see something happen, we believe even when all signs point to the contrary. This is like seeing a rainbow in the darkness, a trust that, when we cannot see, God is still working. Jesus did not say that results would always come immediately, but he affirmed that faith is the condition for good things to happen. Faith helps us face difficulties with a strong spirit and peace, even when we're unsure of the outcome. Faith doesn't eliminate difficulties, but it gives us the strength to overcome them without losing hope. Faith isn't a passive feeling or an attitude of waiting for something good to happen naturally. It's a powerful spiritual force that helps us overcome challenges, fears, and worries. When Jesus spoke of faith as small as a mustard seed, Matthew 17 verse 20, he highlighted that the size of the faith isn't important. Even if faith is small, if placed in the right place, in God, it can accomplish things that seem impossible. The strength of faith lies in its ability to provide a spiritual pillar that allows us to face difficulties without wavering. Those with faith don't deny reality but see it from a different perspective, trusting that God has a plan for them. Faith is the engine that drives us to keep fighting and trusting, even when what happens around us is incomprehensible or painful. A mother facing her child's illness but maintaining firm faith trusts that, regardless of the outcome, God has the best plan. The inner strength of her faith helps her overcome anxiety, not because the illness disappears but because her faith allows her to see the problem from a perspective of surrender. The story of the woman who suffered from bleeding for 12 years is an example of the power of faith, Mark 5 verses 25 to 34. She had no way of healing herself, but she firmly believed that just by touching Jesus' cloak, she would be healed. When she did, Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." This underscores that it was her faith that triggered the miracle. Faith isn't simply about passively waiting for good things to happen, it drives us to action. Jesus teaches us not only to pray but also to combine faith with concrete actions. Faith doesn't eliminate personal responsibility but motivates believers to act based on their trust. Jesus said, "Whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things." John 14 verse 12. Faith compels us to act with the conviction that God will help us. This doesn't mean we have to solve everything on our own, but that we act guided by God, trusting that he walks with us. For example, the woman suffering from bleeding didn't just believe in her heart, she acted by touching Jesus' cloak, trusting that this action would heal her. The combination of faith and action. Faith helps us overcome our fears and limitations. When we believe that God is acting, we move forward with courage, even when the path seems uncertain. When we have faith, we no longer worry about the outcome but trust in God's plan. In modern life, people face illnesses, losses, or financial difficulties. Those with strong faith do not sink into fear but surrender and believe that God will answer their prayers, even if the result doesn't come immediately or as expected. Faith isn't a tool to obtain what we personally desire but a path to inner peace. Faith isn't just about praying to get what you want but trusting God in all circumstances, accepting that what happens is part of a greater plan. People who live with faith often experience inner peace because they believe everything in life is in God's hands. This doesn't mean they don't face challenges, but faith helps them see the light even in the darkest moments. Faith brings inner satisfaction, even when life doesn't unfold as expected. Someone facing a severe illness may find peace in knowing that God is with them. Although the situation is difficult, they feel God's presence and love, allowing them to be at peace. Jesus taught that faith isn't just passive belief but a force that drives action. In Matthew 17 verse 20, he said, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." Here, faith not only involves believing in what is unseen but also serves as a source of motivation to achieve what we sometimes think is impossible. Faith is the spiritual strength that helps us overcome our limitations. In Matthew 6 verse 25, Jesus says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Your heavenly Father knows that you need them." Faith is the antidote to worry because it helps us understand that God already knows our needs and will provide. Anxiety arises from fear of the unknown. But with faith, we no longer fear the future because we trust that God is in control and cares for us. When we truly trust in God, worries disappear. Faith allows us to face each day without being overly concerned about the future. Instead of sinking into anxiety over things we cannot control, faith helps us live in the present and let God do His part. Living with faith doesn't mean we'll always get the results we want, but it brings peace and hope in all circumstances. Faith helps us understand that everything that happens is part of God's plan, and regardless of the outcome, He cares for and guides us. Living with faith enables us to face life's challenges without being shaken by fear or disappointment. Faith is a deep connection with God, trusting that He will guide us through every difficulty and bless us with the best. People who live with faith tend to have a calmer spirit, less influenced by immediate difficulties, and always have hope for the future. Faith is not only a spiritual pillar but also a compass that gives direction to our lives. By living with faith, we believe there's something greater than ourselves, a divine presence that guides our decisions and gives meaning to our actions. Without faith, life can feel like a series of disconnected events, which can generate a sense of emptiness or hopelessness. Faith helps us see beyond the immediate and believe that everything that happens to us has a greater purpose beyond our understanding. A key example is how faith transforms pain and adversity. Many people face terminal illnesses or devastating personal losses. Without faith, these events can seem insurmountable, but with faith, people find in their suffering an opportunity for spiritual growth. They believe that God has a purpose for their trials and that these experiences are part of a divine plan to strengthen, purify, or draw them closer to Him. Biblical sayings about faith in times of adversity: Romans 8:28, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him." This verse teaches us that even the difficulties we face are part of God's plan for our good. This motivates us not to see problems as punishments but as opportunities to find a greater meaning. Corinthians 4:17, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." This passage reminds us that, in the life of faith, trials and pains are not eternal but are tools that God uses to build a glorious future. One of the greatest challenges is having faith when everything seems uncertain. However, faith calls us to trust that, even though we don't see the whole path, God does. This concept is reflected in the verse from Jeremiah 29 verse 11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Faith does not make things easy, but it makes them possible. This reminds us that faith does not eliminate problems but gives us the strength to face them with confidence. When everything seems dark, faith is that light that guides you through the storm. It motivates us not to give up in times of trial because with faith, there will always be light at the end of the tunnel. Faith also helps us not to seek the purpose of our life solely in material things. In the modern world, success is often measured by material achievements or social positions. However, faith teaches us that true satisfaction and happiness don't come from what we possess but from our relationship with God and how we live our lives in alignment with His will. An inspiring quote: "What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul?" Mark 8 verse 36. This verse teaches us that true happiness is not found in money or power but in living a life where our actions reflect love, faith, and service to others. One of the most moving examples of a life lived with faith is that of Pope John Paul II. During his pontificate, he faced countless challenges, both personal and global, including an assassination attempt in 1981 that nearly cost him his life. Despite these difficulties, Pope John Paul II maintained an unshakable faith in God, and instead of filling with hatred, he forgave his attacker. This act of forgiveness and faith was a powerful testimony to the world of how trusting God can transform even the darkest circumstances into opportunities for reconciliation and love. His famous phrase, "Do not be afraid. Open wide the doors for Christ," sums up his vision of a life lived with faith. For him, faith was not just an internal belief but a constant invitation to trust in divine providence, even when the world seemed filled with chaos and conflict. Another outstanding example is Mother Teresa of Calcutta. Despite working in conditions of extreme poverty and illness, Mother Teresa never lost her faith in God or the intrinsic value of every human being. She said, "Be faithful in small things because it is in them that your strength lies." Her life teaches us that faith is not just an act of trust in God but also a source of motivation to act with love and compassion toward others. Mother Teresa dedicated her life to serving the poorest of the poor, guided by her faith that every person, no matter how marginalized or despised, is loved by God. Her faith kept her strong amid extreme difficulties and allowed her to bring hope to thousands of people. When a person lives without a spiritual foundation or belief beyond the material, their world tends to be fragile in the face of the unpredictable. Problems that arise, such as the loss of a loved one, a serious illness, or job loss, become devastating moments because they lack a frame of reference that allows them to interpret pain beyond the immediate. Without faith, difficulties often seem senseless, amplifying the sense of despair. Psychologist Martin Seligman, in his work on learned helplessness, shows that when people feel they have no control over their destiny, they experience hopelessness. This can be exacerbated by the lack of faith, which offers no comfort or a broader vision of existence. People without faith tend to seek solutions only on the earthly plane, which is often not enough when facing deep crises. As you mentioned earlier with the example of Viktor Frankl, the search for meaning is essential for human well-being, and in times of crisis, faith often provides that meaning. For those without a belief system, facing adversity can lead to an existential crisis because they lack a framework to see obstacles as part of a larger process of learning or spiritual growth. A classic example is the story of survivors of natural disasters or wars. Those who have strong belief in something beyond the physical, whether in God, destiny, or a greater purpose, tend to show greater resilience. In contrast, those who lack this belief system often find it harder to recover emotionally and regain hope. Author Harold Kushner, in his book When Bad Things Happen to Good People, talks about how faith doesn't necessarily prevent suffering, but it transforms the way people perceive and handle it. He emphasizes that people with faith don't feel completely abandoned in their struggles because they believe there's a purpose behind their trials or that, at least, they are not alone in their pain. Various psychological studies have shown that people who lack a sense of faith or spirituality tend to experience higher rates of anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues, especially during times of crisis. Without a transcendent vision, problems seem insurmountable, leading to an emotional downward spiral. Research in the field of positive psychology has shown that people who maintain active faith or a healthy spiritual life have higher levels of well-being and life satisfaction, even in difficult times. An inspiring quote from the Dalai Lama reflects this idea: "Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional." Having faith doesn't eliminate difficulties, but it offers a way to navigate them with hope and inner peace. In times of crisis, another negative effect of living without faith is the lack of a supportive community. Many religions and spiritual belief systems foster unity and mutual support among their followers. This support network can be crucial when facing difficult moments, providing not only material help but also emotional and spiritual backing. Those without faith often don't have access to these community networks, leading to isolation and a sense of being alone in their suffering. In contrast, people of faith often find comfort not only in their beliefs but also in the support of their community. A phrase from the well-known writer C.S. Lewis sums up this idea: "Friendship is born at the moment when one person says to another, 'What? You too? I thought I was the only one.'" Faith offers this kind of connection and solidarity in times of need. Finally, faith not only provides comfort in the present but also hope for the future. In times of crisis, believing in a better future or in a greater purpose gives people the strength to keep going. This is something that great spiritual leaders and thinkers have defended throughout time. Mahatma Gandhi affirmed, "Faith is not something to hold on to in moments of weakness but the strength in times of trial." Hope is what keeps people resilient and capable of seeing beyond the current adversity. In summary, living without faith in times of crisis can lead to deep despair and a sense of isolation, while those who have active faith often find it an invaluable resource for facing life's challenges. Without the ability to see suffering as temporary or part of a greater purpose, people without faith often feel trapped in their pain, with no clear way out or hopeful future. Prayer is a central practice in the development of faith because it represents an intimate and direct connection with God. In moments of uncertainty or weakness, prayer acts as a source of comfort and strength. Jesus repeatedly showed us the importance of prayer in his earthly life. He would retreat to quiet places to pray, Luke 5 verse 16, demonstrating the need to find space for constant prayer. In Philippians 4 verses 6 to 7, we are encouraged not to worry about anything, but to present our requests to God in prayer with thanksgiving. The verse promises that the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Here it is evident that prayer is not just an act of asking but a tool to receive inner peace, a peace that the world cannot give. This suggests that a constant practice of prayer strengthens faith by providing us with unwavering confidence in God's care and provision, regardless of our circumstances. A helpful tip for developing faith through prayer is to start with gratitude. Thanking God for blessings, big and small, transforms our perspective and reminds us of His goodness. Prayer can be as simple as an honest and open conversation with God, where one confesses fears and hopes, and most importantly, listens. Sometimes, we strengthen our faith not only by speaking but by waiting silently for divine direction. The Bible is an inexhaustible source of inspiration, guidance, and wisdom for the believer. Romans 10 verse 17 teaches us that faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word about Christ. This indicates that the more we expose ourselves to the Scriptures, the more our faith strengthens. Through daily reading and meditation on the Word, we begin to see how God has acted in history, which gives us the confidence that He will continue to work in our lives. Biblical accounts such as that of Abraham, known as the father of faith, Genesis 12-22, teach us about patience and trust in God's promises, even when circumstances seem impossible. Abraham did not waver in his faith when God asked him to sacrifice his son Isaac, because he trusted in God's goodness and higher plans. By reading stories like these, we learn that faith is not blind but based on God's unchanging character. An inspiring verse is Isaiah 40 verse 31, which says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles, they will run and not grow weary, they will walk and not be faint." This passage reminds us that waiting on God, sustained by faith in His promises, rejuvenates us and gives us the strength to keep going, even when our strength seems depleted. A practical tip for strengthening faith through the Bible is to dedicate time each day to reading and meditation. Start with small passages but read them slowly, reflecting on their meaning. Ask yourself how you can apply these teachings to your daily life and ask God to reveal what He wants you to learn at that moment. Memorizing key verses is also helpful because, in times of difficulty, these words can be an immediate source of strength and direction. The practice of gratitude. Gratitude is a powerful tool for developing faith. When we actively acknowledge the blessings we receive, both small and large, our perception of the world changes. We become more aware of God's presence and provision in our daily lives. 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 18 tells us, "Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus." Here, we are exhorted to maintain an attitude of gratitude, even in difficulties. By practicing gratitude, we remind ourselves that God is always working for our good, which in turn strengthens our trust in Him. A useful exercise is keeping a gratitude journal, noting at least 3 things you're thankful for each day. Over time, this helps train our minds to focus on the positive, continually reminding us of God's faithfulness. Additionally, this exercise allows us to see how He has answered our prayers, which reinforces our faith. Fostering a community of faith. Faith doesn't grow in isolation. God created us as relational beings, and part of strengthening our faith involves surrounding ourselves with a supportive and encouraging community. Hebrews 10 verses 24-25 urges us not to give up meeting together with other believers, encouraging one another. When we participate in a faith community, whether through church, Bible study groups, or believing friends, we find support in times of weakness and celebration in times of victory. A practical tip is to get involved in a faith community where you can learn from others and share your own faith journey. Hearing testimonies of how God has worked in others' lives can be inspiring and strengthen your faith, reminding you that you're not alone in your spiritual walk. The act of trusting in the midst of uncertainty. One of the biggest challenges in strengthening faith is learning to trust God in the midst of uncertainty. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6 tells us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." This verse is a reminder that faith isn't about always knowing all the answers but about trusting that God has a plan, even when we cannot see it. A useful exercise for this type of trust is practicing the abandonment of our daily worries to God in prayer. As we do this, we learn to trust more in His direction and rely less on our ability to control outcomes. In summary, developing and strengthening faith is an active process that involves prayer, reading scripture, gratitude, community, and, above all, learning to trust God, even in the most uncertain moments. The necessary support on the journey of faith. Living with faith is a process that is not done alone. Throughout our spiritual journey, we need the support of others and certain practices that help us remain steadfast in our faith. Being part of a faith community is fundamental to maintaining and strengthening our belief. In church, we find support, encouragement, and teachings that guide us in our walk with God. The community provides us with a space to share our experiences, doubts, and victories, which reinforces our trust in God and others. Sacraments and spiritual practices. Sacraments, such as the Eucharist and confession, are also essential for nurturing our life of faith. Through these sacraments, we receive God's grace and renew our relationship with Him. The Eucharist, in particular, is a constant reminder of God's love and presence in our daily lives. Faith is more than a mere belief, it is a living force that guides, transforms, and sustains humans at every stage of existence. In a world full of uncertainties, challenges, and times of trial, faith provides not only hope but a deep trust that, beyond our limitations and what we can understand, there is a divine purpose that gives meaning to everything. Living with faith frees us from the anguish of the unknown and allows us to face life with courage and serenity. It teaches us to see beyond the material, connecting us with a spiritual reality that transcends our temporary circumstances. Through faith, we find the courage to forgive, the strength to move forward in times of crisis, and the clarity to live a life filled with purpose and love. On the other hand, living without faith deprives us of this inner light, leaving us vulnerable to existential emptiness and hopelessness. Those who choose to walk through life without believing in something greater than themselves often find themselves disoriented and demotivated in the face of life's inevitable challenges. Faith is not a magical solution to all our problems, but it is the foundation upon which we build a full and meaningful life. It is the spark that ignites our hearts and leads us to act with compassion, love, and hope. And although the path of faith is not always easy, it is filled with rewards that far outweigh any difficulty. Therefore, living with faith is not only an act of trust in God but also a conscious decision to open oneself to the possibility of the divine, of miracles, and of a love that transforms everything. With faith, we not only overcome the impossible but also find the true meaning of our lives.